Hello legends! In this video, I'm going to show you how to extract text from PDFs and images using this n8n workflow. So at a high level, we'll be able to drop PDFs and images directly into a Google Drive folder. We'll then take the files out of that folder. We'll switch between two different workflows. One workflow for PNG, where we're going to be using a community OCR node to extract the text from the image, which is this node over here, which is called Tesseract.js. And if we get a PDF, we'll be taking this second route and we're making an API call to llama parse to extract the text. Llama parse is probably one of the best and most accurate ways to parse highly complicated documents into LLM ready data. So then after we use OCR for images or llama parse for PDFs, we then use an LLM to extract certain information, and then we log that information in a Google Sheets, and then we're mapping that extracted information directly into these columns. So for this example, we're going to be using an invoice processing agent. So over here, we're logging the name of the invoice, the category of the invoice number, the biller, and then the invoice totals with and without tax, and then the tax amount. So the reason we have the Google Drive nodes at the start and the end of the workflow is because we have this kind of folder layout where we have a tax unprocessed folder where we're dropping in all the new invoices that we need to be processed with the n8n pipeline. And after they are processed, they're moved across to this processed folder so that this folder is always clean and empty. So this is that process visually. So we drop files into the unprocessed folder. We then run those files through the n8n workflow, and then we move the files across to the processed folder so that everything is clean and organized. So let's actually give this a demo. You'll be able to download this workflow from my Gumroad. I'm going to have a link in the description of this video. So you can just take that workflow and then import it into your workspace by doing import from file and then clicking on that file. All right, so let's go across to tax unprocessed and upload a file. So we'll be processing this invoice first. This is a PNG. As you can see, it's got a lot of information here. We've got the business name, the business address, the invoice number, the invoice date, and the due date, as well as the line items on the invoice, and then a subtotal, the tax amount, and then the actual total of the entire invoice. Let me just drop that invoice into this folder. All right, awesome, it's here. Now let's go back into n8n. Now let's click on execute workflow. It's gonna trigger this Google Drive to search for new files that were uploaded. We go to this switch module, we see that it's an image, so it's got the PNG extension. We use the OCR node to strip out the text. We then push it through this information extractor, we drop the details into Google Sheet, and then we move those files around. So looking at some key information, the invoice number is 12745, and that correlates to this, 12745. We have $1,917 as a total, which is also here as well, so 1,917. Then we have 1,775 subtotal, and then 142 for tax, and that's the exact same information that we have here. So breaking this down bit by bit, we actually have this set up to poll every single minute for changes into this folder, and that's going to be picking up any new files that are added into this folder. Once we pick up a new file, we pull out the key details of that file, and then we use another Google Drive node to actually extract the file. So one of the identifiers that we have is a file ID. So just going down towards the bottom, we have this identifier over here, and we're essentially just pulling this directly into here. Now I've just doubled it up. And this file ID represents the ID of the uploaded electro-invoice. And yeah, we're just using the file and then the operation download. And now we actually have the binary data on our canvas that we can use to extract the information from, which is this thing over here. So then we jump into our switch module and we're looking at the extension. So for this variable over here, we're actually going back to the initial Google Drive trigger. And if we go down a little bit, if we go into that file, into the file details, we're actually going to be taking the extension, which is over here. So we've got the full file extension or the file extension. I'm actually using this one in this case. I'm just pulling this directly into here. And as you can see, it has PNG. So then our filter is saying if the file extension is equal to PNG, we're taking that and we're taking the PNG route. And as you can see over here, it's actually highlighted this because it's identified this as a PNG. And on the other hand, if it was a PDF, we're still taking the exact same file extension. Like this format of data is the same for both sets of files, PNG or PDFs. It's just that the file extension is going to be different over here. So for the second route, we're taking PDF. We've renamed the output to PDF, but in this case, since it's not a PDF, this route is empty. So then we plug it into our Tesseract OCR node. Now, to download this node onto your canvas, if you don't have it already, like when you're downloading my workflow, this might actually be empty for you. The first requirement is that you have to have a self-hosted n8n. It's not available on the community version just yet, but you'll go across to this GitHub repo, you'll copy this exactly as it is, and then back in n8n, you'll go across to your settings panel, you'll find community nodes, and then you'll click on install, and you'll paste it into here, and then you'll click on this to represent that you understand the risks of installing third-party community nodes. Then just click install and you'll be able to use it on your canvas. So now going back into this OCR node, we have the binary data available to us, and we're just using the data name here. We're placing it directly into this where it says import image field name. Now our operation is just extract text because we have a relatively simple invoice. And then on the output, we're actually pushing through the binary data again, but if you go across to JSON, this is the actual output of the OCR node. And you can see here it has the key text, and you have 4675 Industrial Road Suite. And if I just bring this invoice back here, you've got the address over here. And then the other key information is invoice number 12345, which is over here. It looks like ChatGPT actually generated two different invoice numbers, so it's a little bit confusing. But then you have the due dates, you have the different items that were added, the total values of the items. So 850 for electrical panels. Then you have wiring and cables installation, and then you have the total 1917, which is 1917 over here. So overall, this is very accurate. It's a 93 confidence score out of 100. So for our use case over here, this is actually perfectly extracted all the information. Now back on the canvas, we have this code node, and this code node, all it's doing is just taking the JSON from here where it says text, and it's converting that text to just read Markdown. It's not really doing anything else over here, except it's added some information here saying parsed invoice, which we don't really care about. But we actually just want this to be called Markdown for the reason of when we're getting the information for the PDF flow, the information we get from the final API call, we're extracting the information, also puts the text of the PDF, like the extracted text, with the key Markdown. Now, we need both of those to be the exact same because when the data enters into this merge node, it pushes right through from whichever node it is. This is either the image processing or the PDF processing. And both of the key value, like the name of the key is called Markdown. So the very next node is expecting a Markdown item for it to process. So this information extractor is basically saying, cool, the previous node, we're going to go into JSON.markdown. So it's, I've kind of tried to explain that, yeah, this comes out and it has Markdown, that comes out and it says it has Markdown, so this is expecting the exact same name. Now, I use this, which is a do nothing operation for a lot of the workflows where I need to merge two wires together, but only one wire will be live. So it's not an actual merge node, it's not combining both data sets. All it's doing is just taking whichever wire is live and pushing it directly through. This is the easiest way that I found how to do this. Now, over in information extractor, really what I would do if I was you, I would just go into ChatGPT and say, hey, I want to create a document processing agent for invoices or for extracting information from contracts or whatever your use case is, and then ask it to quiz you on what kind of data you want to be extracting from it. Then based on whatever data you want to extract from it, maybe you upload a couple of sample invoices or contracts, and then it can actually give you a proper set of attributes to pull out. So all we're doing is passing that text in, which is the extracted text from either the PNG or the PDF, directly into this field over here. So we're just dragging this directly into here. And then we're building out all the different items that we want to be pulling out of this text. So this in general is like a semi-AI, like an AI agent step. It's not an AI agent because it doesn't have tools and memory, but it works in a very similar way. So we have to attach an actual AI brain into this. And then what I've done over here is actually I've taken a lot of these variables that we're pulling out, like invoice category, invoice number, invoice biller, and these are the exact same stuff that we see over here. So the file name and the file URL is just from the Google Drive node, but then invoice category, invoice number, invoice biller, all this stuff is extracted using the information extractor node. So that's what we've done over here. And the main thing is you want to be very accurate with your descriptions. For example, with the category, you want to give a definitive amount of categories to choose from. So in our case, I'm keeping it very simple. I'm saying the invoice that we receive is either going to be for office supplies, for bills, or for rent. Yours would be probably a bit more comprehensive, but you want to be you want to give a definitive amount of actual categories that it can choose from, because then you can actually start doing some kind of reporting and manipulating your data for reporting. If you just have any number of different categories, there's no consistency, and you cannot do grouping, and you can't actually, look at your overall spending and say, okay, for rent, I accounted for 20% of my total revenue, or office supplies accounted for 50% of total revenue. Whoa, what's going on with that? Let's dig into it. Let's pull all these different categories out. Let's see what the line items were and what the invoices were, and try to make some efficient choices after that. So after you have your information extractor, it brings out your data in this kind of format. So once again, you have the invoice category, invoice number, the biller, all the stuff that you listed over here. Make sure you also list it as required, and it pulls out directly into here. And now this information is beautifully formatted, ready to be placed into a Google Sheets. And as you can see, I just have a file called tax log. I'm in my sheet 1. So that's it over here, tax log, and I'm in sheet 1 over here. And I've just mapped all those variables from here. So like invoice category, I've drag and dropped it into here. So JSON.output invoice category. And I've done the same for these. So everything from category onwards is just literally just dragging these variables onto here and then dropping them in. Whereas these two top ones, the file URL and the file name, I wanted this to be clickable so that when I'm in Google Sheet, I can actually just click on this link and then open up that actual file without having to search, what is it, where is it? So it's easy for me to find. And to get those, you just go to the very first Google Drive trigger, and then we're going to find the file URL and the file name. So we're just going to keep going all the way down till we get into the file area. And we have our file name over here. So original file name, you'll just drag it off. You just drag it into this file name over here. And then scrolling up a little bit, we have the web view link. And that's what we drop into this file URL space over here. So then on the output, you see that it was successfully mapped directly into Google Sheets. And then finally at the end, we have 3 Google Drive operations. And that's going to help us actually move the file from the tax unprocessed folder, where we originally dropped the file into, across into the tax processed folder. So the first Google Drive is to actually re-download that file and have the binary information available to us. And we mainly do that because when we process the binary file, so we download it here and we process it either via the OCR or the actual API calls here to upload to Llama Parse, we lose that binary file. So to access it again, we actually have to download it before we can use it to move it across to a different folder. So we download the file over here, and then in this one, we actually upload to that new folder. So we just scroll down and you can see that we're moving it across to the tax processed. So whatever you're calling your folder over here, you just find that folder. Since we have the binary from the previous download, it's usually always called data. So then we're putting the data name over here. And what this is saying is take this binary data from the previous download and push it across into this tax processed. So at this stage, technically we have that file existing in 2 different drives. And then finally, we want to take the file out of the original drive. So over here, we're using that delete operation and we're pulling in the file ID. So the Google Drive trigger that we had initially, just to keep everything consistent, just the very first one over here. We scroll down just like at the very, very second note, to the very start of this flow, we took the file ID, so over here, and we just dragged it into here. And then this means once we run this operation that it's actually being deleted out of the original folder. So if we go into the tax unprocessed, let's click into here, and that's empty like expected. And then we go into the tax processed, and that's where the invoice is. Now let me run you through if we upload a PDF. So for the PDF example, we're using the exact same invoice, but I've actually just converted it to a PDF. I want this so we can actually see the consistency between using the OCR and actually using Llama Parse API to process the invoice. So going into tax unprocessed, let's drop the file into here. Now the PDF is available. Let's execute the workflow. So let's pick up that file, download it, bring it onto the canvas. So then over here, the first operation we're making is we're actually uploading it across to Llama Parse. We then have to wait while the document is being processed. We check the status, and if the status is that it's successful, we take this top route and we continue with our workflow. And if the status says that it's pending, we circle back, we wait a little bit longer, and we kind of recheck the status until it's successful. In our case, it was actually done pretty quickly, and we then download the file using this GET request. And then just like before, we put it into this merge, and then it goes into this information extractor and follows the same process as before. So let's dig into this workflow to figure out what's going on. So the first thing I want us to do is go across to Llama Parse and click on Get Started. You can actually sign up for a free account. You don't have to add any billing information to start using this. And the easiest way to get started is to go across to your API key section, click on generate a new key, and then copy that API key, and then go into this upload node. Let's double click, and then just scroll down, and where it says the authorization and bearer, just paste it into here. Make sure that you have a space between the bearer and your API key. That's just a standard formatting, and then you'll be good to go by using this node. So just taking a look at what's happening over here, the first API call is to use the upload endpoint. So to get all the API information that we need, you just go back to your home page by clicking on home in Llama Parse. Then you're going to go across to direct API. Let's click this. And now we're going to go on to API. And we actually have all the different API calls that we need. So the first one is we're making an API call to actually upload the document. And I've just taken this information and I've processed it into this API call in n8n. So it's a post request to this endpoint. Scrolling down, we have accept application JSON. We have the authorization, so we can actually use this service. Scrolling down a little bit more, we have this body content type is form data. We use n8n binary file because this is an n8n binary file. We then have the file name is data, which once again, it's data just like before. So then when we upload it, we get the ID of the upload, and then we have the immediate status, which is pending. So then going back to the canvas, the very first thing I'm doing is just I'm waiting for 5 seconds. Now, depending on your workflow, you might find that 5 seconds is a little bit too fast. If you have a very complicated PDF that you need to extract data from, you might want to wait for 10 seconds, just so you don't actually make too many API calls to kind of check the status. So then the second API call is just to check the status. To do this, all I did was I got this. I just duplicated this same API call. Then I pasted it here. I changed the method to get. And now we're actually using the get endpoint. And then we're putting in that JSON ID. So that JSON ID is just this. It's actually from this first API call. It's this variable over here, which is the ID of the upload. But it just pushes through the wait as well. So you can actually grab either one of these. So you can actually just go like this directly into the canvas. Now with this, we're making the API call. We have the same headers as before, accept application JSON and the authorization and the API key. And we have no body. We don't actually need a body because we're just checking the status. In our case, the very first call, we returned the ID of the upload, and then the status was success. So then back on the canvas, we have this little switch router over here. Now, there's a couple different statuses for this initial upload when we're actually checking if the file is ready to go. And to get those statuses, you just go back into your API reference, you click onto here to go into more documentation and click on get job. This is the API endpoint that we're actually working with. And if I zoom into here, these are all the possible values. So in our case, we're just looking at pending and success. We don't have actual workflows for error, partial success, and canceled. I'll leave that up to you guys to improve the workflow, but for now, pending and success should actually be enough to get you started. So that's why we have this in caps lock over here. It has to be in caps because that's what we saw in the documentation. And now we're just taking that status variable from the previous node, we're dragging it into here, and now we're just checking if it's successful or if it's pending, and then we're taking two different routes. In our case, it was successful, so we took the success route. And then finally, we use the get API call, and this get API call is now just the endpoint that's going to return the extracted text in markdown format. Once again, similar to before, we don't actually send the body, but we keep the same headers as before. So now you see that the output is the markdown. And like I mentioned before, in that very first flow, if we're using the OCR, we actually have markdown as the variable that we're using. And now in our case, we have the really nicely rendered markdown format. As you can see, it contains the same information as before. So all the information that we had on the invoice. Now going back onto the canvas, we see it comes into this do nothing operation node that I've just called as merge. It has the same markdown that we're expecting for the next node, which if we go into here, we see that we're using json.markdown. So everything is working perfectly. So we've already gone over all these steps as before. And just to check the data in Google Sheet, so we have, in this case, we actually had the LLM step, which is looking at the different categories. Say this is office supplies. I really think that's because my categories were pretty general, they're not too specific, but the main information we're looking at is 12745 for the actual invoice number. What do we have over here? The invoice biller, so we had the address, but in this case we had the business name. So this is only just kind of looking at the LLM extractor step and just refining it a little bit more. But but then we have the total without tax, and then the tax amount, which is the most important stuff. This is correct. And actually, yeah, we could just sharpen this up. But this is overall very good, very accurate for both cases. And then going back into Google Drive, so we had the unprocessed file was dropped into here, and now it's empty. And then it should be in this processed folder. So there we go. We have the PDF and the PNG in the processed folder. So one final thing that I want to show you is this extra workflow over here. This is actually going to go across to this Google Sheet. It's going to pull out all this information and it's going to synthesize it into a report for you. So now let's click on Execute Workflow. So what we're doing over here is we're pulling out all the information from Google Sheet. In this case, we have 22 different line items, so 22 different processed invoices. And in this code node, we're taking all those 22 invoices and we're running it through this piece of code to then compress them into one single markdown file. Now we're doing this because we actually want to flatten all those different rows into something that we can plug into this AI agent. And we're using the GPT 4.1 for the agent because it has a 1 million token context window, which means if you got a lot of files or a lot of invoices uploaded into your Google Sheet, most likely you'll be able to get very far by processing all of them using just that AI step. So if we dig into the AI agent, we're actually just bringing in the expense summary, which is from the code node directly into here. So we're just dragging this into here. And I've got a prompt that, once again, I went to ChatGPT. I gave it an example of some of the files that I had, and I said, this is what I'm looking at. I also included the previous nodes over here. Well, actually this information extractor, and I said, hey, this is the information that it's extracting. Here's a sample data from the Google Sheet. I kind of just pasted into a ChatGPT window, and I said, I want to run some kind of financial analysis on this. Now, based off the columns that we have, based off the information that we're extracting, create me a holistic system that kind of takes into account the previous process and it kind of uses the information appropriately, just so every system is connected. So we've got a prompt over here. You're a financial report assistant. You receive this information, which is the list of all the different invoices. And then we ask for a couple different things to be done. We have an expense summary. We have the expense breakdown, vendor insights, and then a list of recommendations. So then the output is actually the text that we're going to be dropping directly into the Google Docs. And now for Google Docs, the very first thing we need to do is actually create the file. So that's what we're doing over here. We're just using the resource document and operation create. This just creates the file for us. It gives us a file ID. It actually doesn't have anything on this file at this stage. So with this node, it's just completely blank. And then for this node, we're using the update operation. We're dragging in the ID of the file directly from the previous step. So we had the generate step just before. We have this ID variable. We're dragging it onto this into the placeholder here. And then we're taking the agent output and we're adding it as an action. So the action we're doing is we're adding a text object directly into the body of the document at the end of a specific location, which for us, since the document is empty, it's going to be at the very start of the file. And then to get this agent step, we just drop down here. We take this output and then plonk it directly into here. Now this output is formatted in a specific way, so it actually kind of makes sense for our document, but we'll still need to do some kind of formatting later on if we do want to present this to different people in a business. So let's check out that document, go across to Google Drive. We have the financial year expense report over here. As you can see, it's just one static text. There's no different fonts, there's no different headings. So you might just need to do something to kind of make it look a little bit nicer, put some headings in. But at a high level, so this report analyzes 21 recorded business expenses. We have the expense breakdown. So office supplies has 8 expenses for a total of this and an average amount of this. We have repeated invoices, which is probably the one that we actually uploaded ourselves before. So yep, 12745, which we have over here and here. We've got the bills category, the rent category. So these are the 3 categories from the information extractor LLM. We have vendor insights. So this is pretty cool. It actually takes all those invoices that we had over here. It runs an analysis on across all of these and it aggregates the sums. It aggregates the invoice categories. It lets us know what we're spending on. So I think this is actually super handy if you're able to prompt it up even better for your use case. And then finally, we have some recommendations. So review and rectify invoice 12745. It looks like we paid for it twice. That might be a mistake. So just follow that up. So that actually is a pretty good takeaway from a report that we ran using this AI agent. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've watched all the way to the end, I'd appreciate if you could like the video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my page. That'll help YouTube push this video out to more people, and it'll help me grow my channel. All right, guys, I hope you enjoy your new document processing workflow. See ya.